As a home coffee roaster, my goal is to roast with intention. My goal is to be able to take a look at a coffee, read the farm descriptions, the tasting notes, take a look at the seed, and then put a plan together so that I can roast this coffee to its maximum potential. That's what we're going to be doing here today. This is a two-part video. We're going to be starting out by putting a roasting plan together and talking about the whys, the whats, and the hows of putting this plan together. Before we do that, I want you to know that it's going to be a very dense video. There's a lot of information, but we're going to be talking about real basic concepts. You'll be able to follow along, but I would encourage you not to scrub through the video, but to watch the entire video because I answer a ton of questions about why are you choosing a certain charge temperature? How do you know how long to roast this coffee? And how can you predict certain events to take place at a certain time? All of that is going to be covered here in this video, so I would encourage you to stick around. Also, I would encourage you to ask your questions or leave comments because I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to share with you how I do this. This is not the only way, but this is a great way for you if you're learning how to roast coffee to roast with intention. Putting a roasting plan together is critical when it comes to learning how to roast coffee and replicating a great roast, repeating it over and over. The concepts I'm going to be sharing can be applied to a drum roaster like this one here, or an air roaster like a Fresh Roast or Aroma Pro or some other type of air roaster. First, we need to understand what's involved in a roasting plan. We need to understand the coffee and how it's different and how it might roast differently from one bean to the next. My last video that I did asks the question, why each coffee roasts differently. And that is a really important video because we explain why. The coffee seed from one type of coffee to another, grown in one place or a different part of the world or processed differently, all of these factors influence the way the coffee is going to taste. How we roast the coffee is going to influence how it tastes. There's so many factors. And so we're going to talk about that today as we get into our coffee roasting plan, roasting with intention. All right, so first we want to understand the graph or the timeline or what's happening to the beans. Roasting coffee is all about heat being applied to the coffee beans, that's the temperature, over a timeline, a period of time that we roast coffee. So every graph you look at is going to start out with the temperatures going up the left side and increasing in temperature. And then on the bottom portion of the graph, moving to the right, is the timeline. So temperatures will be increasing over time, and you can see here on this graph that along that timeline, there are going to be coffee roasting events that take place during different phases of the coffee roasting process. When we put the beans into the roaster, when we start the roast, from that point, temperatures increase and the coffee will change color. That is moisture being driven out of the bean, evaporating, and the reactions, the caramelization, the Maillard reactions begin to take place. That is the yellow event or the dry end event. That first portion is the dry phase. From yellow until first crack event is called the browning phase or the Maillard phase. And this is when the coffee, the heat being applied to the beans causes the structure, the chemical compound makeup of the coffee seed, the proteins, the sugars, all of these things start to change. They start to have reactions and they start to change as they are exposed to heat. This flavor development continues all the way through the roasting process as we apply heat to the beans. So what happens and what is first crack? Well, as moisture evaporates from the bean, as we get further into this process, the structure is under great pressure from boiling or very, very hot steam building up in the center of the bean, and the structure of the seed eventually will crack releasing that pressure and allowing the center portion of the bean to continue in its roasting process and browning. The longer we take to roast that, the more even the center of the bean color will be compared, more similar it will be to the outer portion or the outer color of the bean. This occurs during the development phase. We use the development phase to balance the coffee so that we have lower acidity and we have a more well-rounded flavor tasting profile as we have a longer development time. And we're going to play all that out here as we put our roasting plan together. So this graph is really important for us to understand and see. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and do that now. I want you to see the difference between a light roast, a medium roast, and a dark roasted coffee. Take a look at this graph. There are 3 different roasts pictured on this graph, and I know it looks confusing, but notice that there's a yellow line going across the center. There is a green line, and then there is a dark red line. The yellow line is a representation of a light roast coffee. Look at the timeline. The light roast coffee is a shorter roast. It uses less time on the timeline. The medium roast takes a little longer to roast, and a dark roast takes even longer to roast. This isn't the only way to roast different roast levels by taking more time and allowing temperatures to increase longer. You can have all 3 roasts have the same total roast time, but you can run into complications with even development throughout the bean, with pushing the coffee too hard and creating roasting defects. And all of these factors are influenced by the type of coffee that we're roasting. Today I am roasting a Dominican Republic coffee. I've never roasted a coffee from Dominican Republic. And this coffee was given to me by the Coffee Bean Corral. Tasting notes on this Dominican Republic Ramirez washed organic coffee. It's a Caturra varietal, 1,400 meters above sea level, grown in the Yarabacoa region. All right, so the tasting notes on this coffee are some sweetness, there is a creaminess to the coffee, and there's a nutty note in this coffee. And so I want to taste all of that experience in this coffee. Now, taking a look at the seed, you'll notice that the seed here, compared to an Ethiopian coffee, is a lot bigger. As a matter of fact, not only is it larger in size, but take a look at the seam, and you'll notice that the seam has a wider gap on this Dominican Republic coffee. And that's because I believe the density of that coffee is lower than that of the Ethiopian coffee, which is a very high density coffee. I did a video on how to measure density at home using a plastic cup. You should check that out. I measured the density and it turned out to be 720 on my homemade density measuring system. I also measured it with an electronic density meter from D-Fluid, and you'll be seeing the D-Fluid highlighted here in a future video. It's an awesome tool, and that showed a density of 760. So it wasn't too far off from my home measurement, and it gives me a good idea. So if you do the home measurement, that's perfectly fine. It gives you an idea of where that falls in the density compared to one coffee compared to another. And density is an important topic because it influences how much heat we can apply and how the coffee is going to respond to heat over time. If I apply a ton of heat to this bean, like I might with an Ethiopian bean that's very dense, then I'm going to have roasting defects with this coffee because it's a lower density. Heat penetrates through the bean much quicker, and so we need to be careful with a low density or a medium density coffee, and we need to be careful applying heat so that we get a nice even roast, but we don't roast it so quickly that we burn the outside of the structure. That's called scorching. Or that we see evidence of tipping. That's where the ends, the tips of the coffee seed have black marks. Or if we have even like craters where part of the surface of the bean pops or cracks from high temperature heat. We don't want any of that because that will be something we can taste in the cup. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have a different approach with this coffee. Instead of me roasting this coffee using a shorter total roast time, I'm going to have to be a little more delicate, and so it's going to take a little longer to roast. That timeline we looked at with the medium, the light, the dark roast, the timeline where the lighter roast had a shorter total roast time and the darker roast had a much longer total roast time. The type of density that we have is going to have kind of a same measurement or a same visual representation where a higher density can have a shorter total roast time than a low density coffee, which will have a longer total roast time just because we don't want to burn the coffee or cause roasting defects. All right, so I think what we need to do now is put the roasting plan together. We need to roast with intention. Never roasted a Dominican Republic coffee. I want to taste the origin. I want that experience. And so I'm going to roast a medium to medium light roast coffee. That is my favorite roast level. I do that a lot here on this channel. We will be roasting some darker coffee so that you can see how that is different, how it roasts differently, how it looks and tastes differently. But ultimately, in order for me to experience the origin, these tasting notes that I want to taste, I don't want to roast it too dark. So my approach is going to have that consideration be a part of my roasting plan. Let's get the roasting worksheet out because this is going to be the heart of our plan. We need to have something to reference, to think through how we're going to roast this coffee, and then we need to follow that plan. And from there we can make changes or adjustments. So let's take a look at this roasting graph and let's start to fill it out. So first I'm putting down the name of the coffee and the amount of coffee that I'm going to roast. We're going to roast 400 grams of coffee. Now, this is going to be part one of the video. The second part is going to be the roast, and you're going to see that play out. But first, we're going to put a plan together, and I'm going to show you how that works, and then you can put a plan together as well between now and then when the roasting video for this plan comes out. So here we are. We are going to complete the information. I've got the density here, 720. I put down the density that I measured with the cup. This falls into a medium density coffee. It's not low density. It's not real high density. So I've roasted coffees of density that are 850, and I've roasted, and that's like an Ethiopian coffee, and I've roasted coffees that are in the 500s, and that's the Monsoon Malabar Indian coffee. That's a crazy coffee. I've got a video on that if you want to check that out, and it's just there's such a difference between the two coffees, and a big portion of that is density. All right, and then process is the other. It's a medium-sized bean, and it's from the Coffee Bean Corral. Again, the link's in the description. Check that out. Fresh crop, open seam, medium density, and I want to taste the origin notes. It's a sweet coffee, some nutty notes, maybe even a little bit of a vanilla note, and there's a creamy texture. I think Coffee Bean Corral said creamy and buttery, kind of a note in there. So we're going to see what we can experience with this roast. So what are we going to do? How are we going to get to this point where we can experience this? Well, there are three factors when we roast coffee that influence taste the most. The first factor is color. The ending color of the coffee is going to be the foremost influencer of what we taste. The darker you go, the more you're going to taste dark roasted coffee. The next biggest factor is going to be the time to first crack. What time is the first crack event going to happen? When that happens, how much time it takes to get the first crack, that is going to influence how the coffee tastes. And then the third factor that really influences what we taste is the amount of development time that we spend roasting this coffee. The development time is from first crack to the end of the roast. So we have to be thinking about this, and we have to make some decisions. So my charging temperature range for this roaster is from 150 Celsius to 200 Celsius. Those are my normal charge temperatures based on how dense the bean is, how dark I'm going to roast, what my total roast time is going to be, and how long I want it to take to get the first crack. So for this roast, I'm choosing a charge temperature of 170 C. It's not aggressive, but it's not too slow where I've got a really long total roast time and a really, really long time to first crack. So 170 C is going to get me from the beginning of my roast to the yellow event in about 5 minutes and 15 seconds. That is my guess. That's my best estimate based on my experience with this roaster. So you might think I'm being very precise. What I would encourage you to do is to experiment with different charge temperatures using the same batch size and the same power input, and you'll notice there's some differences. You'll notice that the coffee roasts faster or slower based on your charge temperature. And depending upon your beans, you might want to be more careful, or you may want to be able to apply more heat in order to accomplish your goals. You'll have to experiment. For me, 170 C. It's going to take about 1.5 minutes before my bean temperature probe starts to show the temperature increasing with this coffee and at the charge temperature that I'm using. That's called turning point. The dry event, 5:15, is when this coffee should turn yellow. That's my best estimate. Time to first crack is going to be an additional 5 minutes after yellow. So that's at 10 minutes and 15 seconds, I should be reaching the first crack event. I should start to hear cracking taking place. How do I know that? I know that based upon what time my dry event is, how much power I'm going to be applying, and I'm going to be adjusting my power so I don't arrive at that temperature and that time too early or too late. So 10 minutes and 15 seconds to first crack, and then we're going to add and spend 2 more minutes in development for a total roast time of about 12 minutes and 15 seconds. It could go a little shorter, a little longer, but that's my best estimate at the color that I want. That's really important. It's one thing to roast and say, I'm going to have a 10-minute roast. But it's the other thing to say, I'm going to have a 10-minute roast and I'm going to have it end at the exact color that I want it to have, at the exact development time that I've planned, and all these other roasting event times. This takes some practice, but this is roasting with intention. So being able to control your roaster is a prerequisite. You got to be able to know your roaster, how it behaves, and how much power and or air to apply in order to accomplish your event times. That's really, really important. And that's something that's just going to take some practice. All right, so now that we have our roast plan together, the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to get the roaster ready, get it preheated, and then we're going to end up starting the roast. That's going to happen in my next video. For now, homework assignment is to download the coffee roasting worksheet for free. I've got a link in the description. It's at my buymeacoffee.com/virtualcoffeelab/extras URL. There'll be a link, as I mentioned. Click on that. You'll see all of the downloads that I have that are free that's there. You can download the 2025 coffee roasting worksheet. This is a brand new worksheet that I've put together. I've made some modifications compared to the one that I've had here on my Buy Me a Coffee site for quite a while. There's been a lot, hundreds, maybe even thousands of downloads for free, and you're more than happy to go ahead and download this for free. I would encourage that. And practice. Just practice filling it out. Take a look at your roaster and practice how long it takes for your coffee to get to your dry event and your first crack event, and become familiar with your roaster. And then at the next video, you'll see this all play out. We'll go through it in detail. I'll talk about the whys, the hows, and all of that, and you'll see that put together here in part 2 of Roasting with Intention. So thanks for joining me today. If you like the content that you've seen here, hit the like button. And if you are new to my channel and you haven't, please subscribe. That's awesome. And I hope you have a great week roasting. Leave your comments, and I'll see you next time. Take care.